probably know. So with that, I would like you to give her a tremendous applause, a welcome, and you certainly have it from my heart. Welcome.
Okay, so let's see if this works. Thank you, Victoria, for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. It's my first time in LA, though I've known Victoria for a long, long time. As she said, we have exclusively met elsewhere. It's always a little bit complicated for me to decide what should I focus on. I do many things at the same time. And I can talk a little bit about the motivations for doing so many things at the same time. They're not really that random, though they seem a little bit dispersed. And talking to students, it's always a little bit, I'm never sure exactly what you would like to learn about what I do. So if it's about my motivations or my strategies or my methodologies or what is interesting for me, because I do many things that may be interesting for you as students. So we'll see how this goes, and if you have any questions, please let me know as they come to you. You don't need to write them down, or you're very welcome to write them down, but you don't need to be hesitant to ask the question when you have it and when the slide is on, because it's fine. I'm not reading from anywhere. My slides are my cues, so I will always be able to go back to my train of thought. And so please ask when you have them. Again, I was explained to that you have very different backgrounds, which also makes this harder for me to really match what is your gap in whatever I do? What is more interesting for you, or what aspect of what I do is more interesting? So again, if you want to ask me more, I may not be able to answer all of your questions, but I will certainly try to go as far as I know. And if I don't know, then I'm sure I will be able to either direct you to a place where you can find out, or maybe we can find out together later. That's my email, and if you do feel at any point that in the future you want to contact me, this is where you should go to. That's also my website, Cultivamos Cultura website, and Ectopia Lab website. So I am not going to play this video now. I will show it later when this artwork is talking. When I'm talking about this artwork, I would like to explain to you. So, as Victoria mentioned, I did a fine arts, a painting degree, a very classical painting degree in a European, very classical, very conservative type of university. There's no such thing as liberal arts or art and science departments or anything like that in any university that I know in Europe. And I did it a while ago. So this also meant that at the time I was limited to painting, sculpture, communication design, or I forgot another kind of design, which I can't remember. No, objects like chairs and things like that. Industrial design. Thank you. And so I slowly went into painting because I had a very nice teacher when I was in high school that said, if you want to be a sculptor, go into painting. If you want to do painting, go into sculpture. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. So, and that's why I went into painting. There was no particular reason or difference for me going to painting or sculpture because I just wanted to make art. So I got very disillusioned during my degree. Apparently my professors thought that I was very good at nude oil painting, and they told me that I should pursue that as a career, and I just immediately thought, I'm never going to do this. this is not anything I even remotely want to do. So I got a little bit disillusioned, and I thought, okay, I'll be a teacher instead of being an artist. And I sort of focused my aim on being a teacher. Of course, things never work out exactly as you planned them. And so midway through my degree, I reconnected with an old friend of mine who had just finished doing a medical degree, who was doing his internship, and was just about to start a PhD in the biomedical sciences. He's now my husband after almost 25 years. But this really changed my perspective because he was talking about so many interesting things for me that I actually ended up being an artist and doing art and biology because of this horizon that opened up, this door that opened up a whole universe of things to look at and to think about. And with my learned skills at university, with my painting degree, I could actually, I think, do a lot of important work as an artist. So I ended up being an artist. I'm also a teacher, but I'm not affiliated with any university. Only temporarily affiliated with different universities. So when I left to do my master's in Oxford in art and science, so in history of art and visual studies, but under the supervision of a very, very well-known and very amazing person, Martin Kemp. If you don't know him, please go check it out. He published for Nature for a very long time. He's now emeritus professor. He's an expert on Leonardo da Vinci, but also very much interested in contemporary art and science. And he accepted me to be his a master student, and I did a master thesis on Richard Feynman and Joseph Beuys diagrams, which was not very common in Oxford at that time. This is 98, 99. And so after doing my master's for 2 years, I stayed in Oxford and I did a lot of art, because as a student of the University of Oxford, you have access to every class, every facility, everything. Just being a student at Oxford makes you decide what you want to do, usually with supervision, but after a master's, your supervision is less tight and you're allowed much more freedom. And so I did a lot of art projects there, and I became an artist, a full-grown artist there, I would say. So going back to Portugal and coming back to this slide, I knew I was going back to Portugal. After Oxford, I went to Australia for a while, and then I knew I was going back to Portugal, and I was doing a lot of work in art and science, and my peers were scattered all over the world. Like Victoria was here, everybody was elsewhere. I knew there were not that many artists in Portugal that I could connect to in the same way or talk about my work without having to explain why I did art and science. And so an opportunity came about to create this space called Cultivamos Cultura, which is south of Lisbon, and so we had the infrastructure, and we were looking for the funds to create this space. And it was my strategy to keep in contact with my peers. So being an artist in any field, you want to make sure that you have people to talk to and to exchange ideas, just like anywhere else or any other field does. And this was my strategy, and I had the privilege to have the place. I needed to apply for funding to finance it, but the community is also incredibly generous and amazing. So just asking people if they wanted to come and stay with me in this place, a lot of them just actually said yes and came. So this was again this moment that I really like the community of art and science and technology. They move themselves and they move things forward. And this was when I realized that it was a privilege to be a part of this community, and I wanted to do more for it, with it, and within it. And so Cultivamos Cultura became this place that is based on the idea that you can do residencies in experimentation. It doesn't matter where your background is. You can be a scientist, you can be an artist. The idea is to experiment, to create this space where you can experiment with methodologies, with medium, with ideas, and you have your peers also there to exchange those ideas with. And this is how it eventually became what it is today. We have a very intense program. We have around 20 residencies per year, most of them self-funded. And we have, with every residence, we have a new piece, because this is what we ask in exchange for hosting people, is that they leave us a piece. So we have quite a big collection nowadays. And with that collection, with the residencies, with the results of the residencies, we have at least 4 exhibitions in Portugal per year. We have around 4 to 5 exhibitions internationally per year as well. And we have summer schools, we have workshops, we have communication activities and educational activities for very different audiences and age groups. And we also organize symposium and conferences. So I'm very proud to say that Cultivamos Cultura grew very much. Now we're a team of 7. We started as me, my partner, and a producer. And our website is actually up to date, so and it's a little bit like our history. You have every event that happened at Cultivamos Cultura has a post on the website, so you can see all the way from 2009 what we've been doing. So this is Cultivamos Cultura, and this is our space. At the same time as I created Cultivamos Cultura, I created Ectopia, which is a different institution, sort of like a sister institution to Cultivamos Cultura. Cultivamos Cultura is in a natural park in a countryside. Ectopia is in Lisbon, and for a very long time, Ectopia's physical space was actually an apartment, because being an artist who works with scientists and does residencies with scientists, you typically work in the lab. But if you're doing a residency, what you need an institution to provide for you is a place to live while you're working in the lab. So we decided we were an apartment with an office space, and that the artist would work in the lab. During the pandemic, we acquired this space, and now we have an exhibition space and studio space together with the apartment side of it and office side of it. It's a very nice place. There's a little library, there's a lounge area, sort of like a living room. There's a full kitchen, so you can actually live there, and a room. And then you have the downstairs, which hosts temporary exhibitions twice a year. But then during the rest of the year, it's basically a studio space where you can research, where you can make messes and clean them up afterwards, hopefully. It's a very nice place, and we've established a more... Well, there's a few. We're not associated again with any university or any research institution. So we pair up with different research institutions for different projects. And we have an ongoing relationship with the Faculty of Medicine at the University of Lisbon. And we created with them this project called Blend, Art and Science. And the idea is to expose as much as possible the scientists to artworks that are being done within the research institute, but also around the world. And so we created this little kiosk in the hall, in the entrance hall of the research institute, because, as I'm not sure many of you know, but it's always complicated in institutions to ask permission to plug something on the wall, or to hang something on the wall, or to put a projector anywhere. It's always very, very even hanging a picture on the wall is always a nightmare in terms of asking permissions. And we wanted to be able to have 6 to 8 weeks exhibitions ongoing. So we also didn't want to have to keep asking, oh, we're going to have this installation that requires these many projectors and these many TVs and this blah, blah, blah. And we need to ask permission every time to what we wanted to install. So my idea was, if we created a kiosk and ask permission to install the kiosk and connect it to a plug to power, then within that kiosk we don't have to keep asking permission, and it has worked really well. So since about a year ago, we've been having constantly 1 or 2 artists exhibiting here. If you go to their website, which is there, you can see which artists are there. If possible, if the artists are physically in Portugal for any given moment, for any given period of time, they come and they do not a presentation. So my idea, instead of having presentations, is to have conversations, which is something that most scientists are not very familiar with. They usually, or artists, by the way. So usually you're asked to talk about your work, right? But I don't ask them to talk about their work. I ask them to talk about a subject, like identity, or the stars in our galaxy, whatever. And both the scientists and the artists who are invited for that specific session need to not talk about their work, but talk about how their work connects to that issue specifically. And this actually gives rise to really interesting conversations, instead of having an artist talk or a scientist talk about their work forever. It has been working really well because both tend to do that forever. And people and students, this is a faculty of medicine, so you have students engaging with these artworks all the time. And for me, this is really interesting. And actually for the communication department of the Faculty of Medicine and the Research Institute, which is at IMM, it has been also very interesting to see the people's reactions to this and scientists' reactions to this. Basically, it has, which was what I was trying to achieve, it has helped funding for artists in residency. So now the scientists are including artists in residency more and more in their grant applications, and they can actually do the management of those instead of me with a tiny institution. So it has worked really well. I also do curatorial projects, and this is an exhibition that I curated on climate change. And Victoria's piece is one of the works that is part of this exhibition. And I'm embedded into that. I'm embedded into the piece. It's actually the first piece of the exhibition, in the sense that this is how you move into the pieces through the immersion into the ocean and plankton through Victoria's piece. But it's a piece that has many different mediums, many different ways of looking at things that we know have to do with climate change, or perspectives and ways of processing our feelings, our emotions, but also the information that we're getting from everywhere. It has been shown in 2 different places, and I hope it will move on at some point to other places. But this is something that I do very passionately and enjoy doing very much. The other thing that I am doing as well, remember, I do many different things, and they seem a little bit dispersed, but I hope with the story that I was telling you before, you understand why I do all of these things. It's really to bring people together to meet, and so that I can also give something back. This is one of the examples where I feel very much that my motivation was to make sure that I was giving something useful back. So with my very good friend and colleague, Dalila Onoratu, we had just a very simple conversation. We know a lot of people around the world we know a lot of women around the world, and a lot of them are artists working in science and technology. And we realized that a lot of them, though the networks overlapped, the overlapping was actually not as strong as we would hope it to be. And so we sat down one day in 2017 and decided, why don't we make an event where these women can come together and meet each other? And this was the beginning of Femme Meeting. And we invited those women to come, and lo and behold, they actually did, which was surprising and very moving for us. And we had our first Femme Meeting in Portugal in 2018. We have our first big Femme Meeting event in the US this year in Taos. It's one of my jobs as a Fulbright scholar to make sure that this happens. The open call is finished, but you're welcome to come to some of the open events if you wish to. It is, I'm very happy to say that next year it will happen in Windsor, Ontario, which is not that far, or it is possible to get to, and it will be hosted by Jennifer Willett, and the open call for that will come soon. And it should be quite amazing, across from Detroit in a very small town. This is how we like to do Femme Meetings. The community is very strong and very powerful, I have to say. It's very tight-knit. We like to help each other, which is what I'm mostly proud of, is that it really is about helping each other out. It was very important during the pandemic. We did a lot of online meetings with no agenda, just to hang out and talk about what we were doing, how we were dealing with reality, and things like that. It's everybody talks for 10 minutes, and then everybody hangs out together and projects come out of these meetings. It's really amazing. So I don't know if you have this problem at all, but as a student in art, I had quite a lot of issues with this question that you see at the very top, which is, what is art? And the major problem I had was that I was told not to ask it. And so I don't know if you have this, if people sort of tell you, you can't ask that question, it's too complicated to answer. Everything can be art, anything is art. And so it's sort of safer not to ask a difficult question like this. I am very contrary, as most artists are, so I don't understand why we keep on not asking this question. We should always ask this question, as we should always ask, what is science? What are you talking about when you say science? What do you mean? What are you talking about when you say technology? What exactly do you mean? What are you referring to? And how does that differ from what other people are using, who are using the same word, are talking about? So as an artist, I decided that this was an important question for me to, if not answer, but at least ask. And as an artist working with scientists, I was repeatedly asked that question at a very personal level. And I had to try to explain over and over again why was I saying that what I was doing is art? And just saying that because it couldn't be anything else is not really a good answer, right? It's very shallow. And so I keep being asked, why do I say that what I do is art? And I keep repeating also that because it couldn't be anything else. And they ask me, why do you say that? And I can't really just answer, because I'm an artist. I was trained as an artist, so what I do is art. That's really lame. Come on. That's really not an answer. Any kind of... so why is it art? And what is art? So if I want to say, why am I doing what I'm doing, and why what I'm doing is art, then I need to try and explain a little bit of how I understand art. What is art for me? And I cannot say that it's an universal understanding, but I do like to poke at art this way. Strangely enough, my best explanation for what I understand as art comes from being in conversation with my life partner, who's an immunologist, okay? And he keeps blowing my mind, saying things that I go, what do you mean by that? And this is what you have here in this slide too. So, So if he asks me what is art, and I will ask, can you explain to me what is the immune system? And he will say really interesting things like this is his favorite answer to that question is the immune system is the most creative organ in your body. And this is sort of like, what do you mean, the most creative organ in your body? Isn't that the brain? Because most people will think it's the brain. So this will make me wonder, what is creative? And this will actually make me think, why is art always associated with creative when actually sciences are as creative as art? And most fields of research are incredibly creative. Creativity is not owned by art, and it shouldn't be thought that way. So when he says that the immune system is the most creative organ in our body, and I ask him, what do you mean by that? Actually, it is the most creative organism in our body because it's the only system in our body that edits DNA. It's the only system in your body that creates molecules that never existed before. It's the only system in your body that is really creating cells that don't have the same DNA as you. So really giving birth to things that don't exist unless they're created by this organ, which is really interesting to do because then you start to think, is that what I do? Am I creating things that wouldn't exist if I was not thinking about them? And it's sort of interesting that way. It's also the organ in your body that is responsible for differentiating you from not you. This is what a healthy immune system is supposed to do. Self and non-self is the sort of the foundation concept for a functioning immune system. And I am an artist who's really interested in the concept of identity. So self and non-self triggers all sorts of things for me. It's also really interesting to think that it does this before you were born. So most of us associate identity with self-awareness and how we understand ourselves. So idea is very much a self-reflective kind of position. But the immune system, if you say that the immune system is about self and non-self, then that challenges that idea that maybe our identity is not just a self-reflective kind of position, that it is something beyond that or under that, or I don't know. But this is really interesting to me to try and see what can we rethink about identity that can actually help us understand identity a little bit better, or maybe redefine identity a little bit better, because I do believe that biology and the biosciences are one of the sources of knowledge that is more challenging to understand who we are. And art has always been about what we are, who we are, where we're going, where do we come from. So this is it's interesting that a knowledge that is fact-based is challenging so much preconceptions that come from philosophy, from aesthetics, from all the theory of and practice of art. And so this is why I'm also fascinated by these things. These actually allow me to challenge my own preconceptions, but also general preconceptions of these ideas. So The next statement is probably the one that's more problematic for most of us, but I also think that this is also why it's more mind-blowing for me. My life partner actually likes to say that the healthy immune system is perfect. And being an artist, perfect is a sort of a strange thing to state. And of course, the question, this when a statement is like this, it is a provocation for you to ask, what is perfect? What do you mean by perfect? And he will go on to explain that perfect is dynamic. Perfect is responsive. Perfect means that it is ready to deal with everything that it has dealt with before. Every disease, every other or non-self that it has encountered before. It retains the memory to handle it again. And you please make note that I'm trying very hard to avoid words like against or fight or any of the aggressive kind, because I do believe, and I know that a lot of immunologists do, we need to rethink that the metaphors and the words that we use to describe the immune system are very much about a battle, a fight against microorganisms and others. And actually scientists don't think of it like that. And more knowledge we have is challenging this idea that the immune system is about defending. It's not really about defending. It's about negotiating and dealing with living together. And this is an important concept to retain. So I do try to avoid as much as possible words that will give rise to this idea that I'm creating antibodies against something. And in the video, you will see that I made that mistake, and I keep going, why? And so this idea of perfect as a dynamic system, as a responsive system, as a system that can deal with everything that it has dealt with before, but more importantly, that is ready to deal with everything that it will encounter during your lifetime, is really interesting for me. So what this is, and this is why I started saying that art is perfect. Okay, I'll get you to that point, hopefully, during this conversation. So this idea that the immune system is everything that it has encountered before, and it's ready to become everything that it will encounter in the future, whether it comes from space or from Earth or from anywhere you can think of, whether it's synthetic or already existing, is really interesting for scientists, of course, but also for me. And when he started explaining this, I started getting an idea that maybe this is what art is for human knowledge. Art is the field of knowledge that it still is everything that it has been before. It doesn't deny anything that it was art before. Everything that was considered art at any moment in our existence is still considered art. It doesn't stop being art. But it's also ready to become everything that it will become in the future without too many restrictions, with a lot of controversy, of course, but that's part of the process. Anything that we will name art in the future, that will become art, will be art, without denying everything that happened before. And this is very unusual in terms of knowledge. Most knowledge is about building on what existed before, but also sometimes something that was knowledge, was known before, either stops being accepted or just becomes obsolete. And art never becomes obsolete. It may be outdated, but not obsolete. The questions and the reflections that other artists did before me never become obsolete. And so this is my understanding of art as well. And I love it for it. And this is why I say that art is close to perfection in terms of human knowledge. And I think it's interesting to think of knowledge as a whole, knowledge is a whole made of many things. Knowledge is not just scientific knowledge. Knowledge is philosophical knowledge, is spiritual knowledge, is artistic knowledge, engineering. It's so many different things, and this is what makes it sort of difficult to grasp, but also fundamental. How can you not have in a whole a part of that knowledge that is not dependent on two very important things, or actually three. There's no need for statistical relevance in artistic knowledge. It's actually an anathema to it to have statistical relevance, being a part of artistic knowledge. There's no need for reproducibility. We don't need to repeat the same knowledge. The knowledge is by itself as valuable as any other artistic knowledge that is produced. And also, there's no consensus requirement. We don't all, or even the majority of us, don't need to understand that specific knowledge, that specific piece gives to us. It is ours, and it is as valuable as the person who's next to me experiencing the same piece. And this is unique in knowledge. This is why I'm absolutely passionate about art. Because it's the only field of knowledge that I know where this is possible, where we don't really have to fight for, is this art or not? Because it is. And so, really, this is my reasoning for what is art and why I think art is a fundamental part of human knowledge, why it should not ever be undermined or put in question. And unfortunately, it has been for many years. So, of course, knowledge itself is different from history, and I have a project that I'm very, very interested in and very proud of at the same time that has more to do with history. So I did a master's in history of art, and though my master's was on a physicist and an artist and their drawings, it was also part of my learning curve to understand how do you make an argument, how do you put a hypothesis forward, how do you explain your position, and what do you need to do to make that hypothesis a valid hypothesis or not. It's not even about proving it or disproving it, because in history of art it's not just about proving it or disproving it, it's about making a good argument for whatever your hypothesis is. And I had a lot of struggles, working in science. You need to work on facts, and you need to be unbiased as possible. Then suddenly you're in the history of art, and though you do need to go to your primary sources and check the facts, your argument is not unbiased. Of course, in science, it's not unbiased either, but that's a very ongoing. But that at least that is their objective, to be as little as biased as they can be. Whereas in history of art, there's no history, let alone this history of art, that is not heavily biased. We do say that history is told by the victors, and this is absolutely true. It's not like there wasn't women artists during every moment in human history, but they're just not there in history. They're not told of. And we've always had cultures and countercultures within art, and this is sort of like the factual proof that you have bias in history. So I thought nowadays, I was involved in Femme Meeting. I know all these women. They're not getting as many exhibitions as they should. They're not getting as much recognition as they should. They're amazing artists. The rigor of their research is outstanding. Why do we keep on having the same people do the same exhibitions and inviting the same artists to those exhibitions? It's very annoying. It's very, very annoying. And so this is the time of information. Information is everywhere. We're bombarded by it all the time. Can we develop a strategy to overcome a little bit of this bias and think of strategies to bring a little bit of more inclusive strategy into the history? You know, let it not just be told by the curators or by the critics or by the theorists of art. Let it be told by the artists as well. How do you devise this? But we now have the tools to do this. And we just need to make sense of it and implement it. And this is, well, we all know this, right? I think most of us at least have an inkling how much history has been edited, right? This is probably one of the most striking examples. So it's crazy, but Lenin actually did this, and he got away with this. Deleting people from history is deleting people from proof by editing photographs before Photoshop was a thing. Okay, this was way before Photoshop was a thing. And they were already editing people out of pictures, historical pictures. Of course, this is an example, and it's a very dramatic and very sort of in-your-face example of what history, or how history is told. I am from Portugal. My neighbors from Spain are taught a completely different story than Portuguese are, and we fought in the same battles, and you just go, okay, this battle, how do they tell this battle, and how do we tell this battle? It's an interesting exercise to do, okay? And having young children, I was doing that a lot because I was, they would come from school saying that the Spanish are horrible, and I would go, well, maybe not, You should look. So this is Archive. This is a platform online, and
to a digital platform where artworks revive.
Sorry, I will start again because I had it in mute. And I think it's very short, so I think it's okay.
An open source archive where everybody has access and they want to deep dive. To a digital platform where artworks revive. And there you find all about biomedia. Podcasts, interviews, exhibitions, protocols, best practices, case studies, and even symposia. Then you also share your own resources, things that you learned, where all the community is there. Institutions, artists, curators, researchers, students, professors, and scientists. People curious about living things and processes. It's all about arts and biomedia, a knowledge base, a shared, open, ever-growing space. Be part of Archive. Bring it to life.
So this, sorry, I should have stopped it where?
An open...
So together with a few other institutions in Europe, we've been thinking for a long time that it's important to document artworks, and it's hard to document artworks. As an artist, it's hard to document artworks. You're most of the time always focused on setting up an exhibition, and then you're so exhausted afterwards that you don't have time to even. You take pictures on your phone, but those are documentation, but not brilliant documentation. You can't afford to have a professional photographer come and do photographs of your artwork in exhibition. You very rarely have time to do documentation of your own process, though it would be really nice if we started doing that as on a regular basis, sort of like a lab book of art. And scientists have to do lab books all the time. They spend time writing down what they did and all of the choices that they made so that they can go back and reproduce what they did before. I'm not advocating for going back and reproducing, though sometimes it's very useful as an artist to know what you did and make a different choice and see if it changes anything in the process or the outcome. But I do think that we're not taught how to make documentation of process or artworks when we're doing things. And this is when we should be doing that documentation. At the same time, we now have tools for documenting things that are a lot more powerful than before. Not just our writing, but also we have much better phone cameras. We have much better. They take videos. We're always producing things for. We're taking pictures whenever we go on holidays. Why don't we take as many pictures when we're making mistakes in our art practice? They would be really interesting, especially for an institution like Cultivamos Cultura and like these 6 institutions that you have there. It is very important to have good documentation. If you want curators to understand what you're doing, if you want them to understand that you can be shown in an exhibition on climate change, you need to explain what you're doing. And so if you have a collection like we do, or if you have a collection like the Museum of Natural History, which is one of our partners for this project, they have a huge collection of natural history museum specimens. They have a huge collection of dead specimens mostly, but some of them, but always under the weight of time. They're always transforming. It is one of the major things that we have in common with our collection and the collection of the museum is that the artwork that we host at Cultivamos Cultura is most of the time ephemeral, living or dead, or in the process of living or dying, and it's always subjected to time and to forces exterior to the piece itself. And this is one of the things that brought us together, is that documentation becomes fundamental to tell the story of that art piece, because it changes over time. It literally lives, dies, and it has a life cycle. And so you need the documentation to exist at any given moment in this process so that you have a record of what that piece was. Otherwise, it's going to disappear and never going to be talked about again. So we came together because Cultivamos Cultura and the museum have collections, but Container, Kersnikova, Hangar, and Solu are are institutions that host these artworks very often. Artworks that include biomedia and a lot of technology. And so we are interested in creating this archive of documentation, and what does it mean to have documentation of these artworks. And so for us in Cultivamos Cultura, one of the most efficient methods of documentation is actually to have documentaries made. Video documentaries was one of the first strategies that we created to document the residencies that are happening at Cultivamos Cultura. So for every artist that comes in residency, we now produce a 3-minute to 5-minute documentary where the artist is talking about what they're doing there. What are their interests? What are they encountering? And suddenly you have the artist talking about the piece. And that is actually, it became not just documentation, it became the label of the piece. So every time we show a piece now, we show the documentary next to it. And the reaction of the public viewing the piece, having at least a little bit of the artist there explaining what they were doing with the piece, takes on a completely different dimension in terms of engagement with the audience. It's really, really interesting. So this is one of the strongest strategies that we have. The more high-tech strategy that we have is to create 3D renderings of the pieces at different times in their lives. Okay, so this is an installation piece. The one this is an installation piece. I can create exactly what it should look like in exhibition. So if a museum wants to show it, they will know what it looks like in an exhibition. they also, because this piece has been exhibited in different times, every time that it's exhibited in a slightly different way, we do the same thing. So the museum does not have to choose just one way of showing it. It has a myriad of possibilities that will adapt better. They can decide what will adapt better to the space where it's going to be exhibited. The question is, what is the piece and what does it need to be shown as in its integrity without, with how many variables can you actually have? Because spaces are all different everywhere. That piece over there has a real lifespan, so actually has a life cycle that repeats continuously. It's its own little environment, and you see there the little mushrooms that were growing on the side have died. What we do is we continuously do photogrammetry of this piece, and so not continuously, we do it very regularly. So we have the different stages of the growth of this ecosystem. Every year the mushrooms grow, every year the mushrooms die, and spores, so they grow in different parts of the piece because the spores spread out a little bit. And this is important for the story of this. This is the documentation of this piece. Even a piece like this that you probably think it's relatively stable, every time we have to show this piece, there's a little bit of a leaf that breaks off. No matter how careful we are transporting this piece, there's always a little difference between how it was shown before and how it's shown at any given time. So this documentation for us is fundamental. Of course, the artists really love having this because the pieces are with us, but at least they can have, they sort of have what the piece looks like at any given time. And they are encouraged to add on. So the platform is open, not only open, but open source. And so the artists can keep on adding. If the piece has been shown elsewhere, or if they have more information about the piece, they're very welcome and encouraged to add information about any given piece that exists on archive. So, what time is it? 1? So, I'm not going to explain this because it takes a little bit of time. But all of these things matter to me as an artist, of course, but as a curator, a producer, as the director of Cultivamos Cultura and Ectopia. All of these things are really important for me. As an artist, I mentioned before that my interest is very, very clearly questions of identity. So what we are, where we come from, and where we're going is probably the most meaningful line of thought for me as an artist. I believe that to decide who I want to be, I need to have as much information as possible to make a sound decision. And so understanding who I am at any given moment in time is what allows me to make decisions for the future personally, but I also think as a society this is very important. We should know who we are right now to better make decisions for who we want to become as a society. What is our direction? What is our objective? And just the same as I decide I want to be a good person, I did make this decision, and I make it constantly because it is a sort of a constant decision that you have to make. Who do you want to be? Do you want to be a nice person, or do you want to be a nasty person? Strangely enough, it's often in many. I just thought of something that happened today. I said, I want to be a nice person. If someone is rude to you, you do have to make that decision. Do you want to be a nasty person, or do you want to be a nice person? And it's funny because we make those decisions all the time, but very rarely do we consciously make that decision. And that's because at some point in our life we decided to be a nice person or not. And so that decision becomes more or sort of preemptively there, but you still have to remember it because it's, sometimes it's really difficult to not be nasty and just scream at people. But but as a society, we should think more about this. We want to survive. It's not just a matter of survival. We want to survive together. It's not just about humans only, because we can't do it alone. So, whether it's microbes, whether it's plants, whether it's climate change or global warming, we need to understand and to make that very basic decision. Do we want to be a nice society or not? And so identity for me is very important in this process. There's this process of re-problematizing some of the issues that we're having with ourselves and with the rest of the world. And so every project that I do is somehow based on a challenge to my idea of what identity is or can be understood as. And so nowadays, or more recently, I have 3 passions. One is genetic modification, which I'm sure you understand is obviously implicated in issues of identity, though I end up doing these projects mostly as a challenge to genetic determinism than anything else. I think we live in a society where we still, general public understanding of what genetic is still incredibly genetic deterministic. And I do like to challenge that, because that is just not how knowledge is right now. Scientists are very much aware of this, that genes. I was just having a conversation with a scientist, a public conversation with a scientist in Syracuse, and she's doing a lot of genomics, and she did an amazing way of explaining what her interest in genomics is these are ways of describing the organism. But would you ever consider a photograph of you your identity? A way to describe you is not your identity. So genes are a good way of describing an organism, but they're never the identity of that organism. An organism is a lot more than their genes. And so I do try to challenge the concept of genetic determinism very strongly in most of the works that I do with genetic manipulation. The other passion that I have is immunology, as you probably already understood. But I do think that immunology really challenges my preconceptions on identity so forcefully that I cannot avoid thinking about it. And I started working with my husband quite a few years after we were together. I worked with many different scientists. I worked with evolutionary biology, I worked with cell biology, I worked with genetics, I worked with proteins, I worked with so many different scientists. And though I was very curious about immunology, it was very difficult for me to actually reach a point where it made sense to bring in my husband to work with me on a project. And it happened with immortality for 2. I was very interested in this concept of immortality and how cancer cells are called immortal cell lines. So the understanding of the word immortality in these 2 spaces was very, very different. And so I was very interested in that. Actually, my interest was coalesced in my reading of the book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. Okay, so I was really interested in this. It's a very smart title. The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks is really a very interesting story. I advise you to read that book as soon as you can. And so my first instinct was, I want to work on this concept by making my own cells immortal cell lines. What does it mean to create a cell line that is a cancer cell line out of my own cells, outside of my body? And how do I understand this process or this concept of immortality through this. I'm an artist. Artists historically are understood to want to create immortal work, right, and be recognized through work that outlives them. But for health and safety reasons, this was not an option. So I cannot work with my own cells outside of my body and purposefully turn them into cancer for health and safety reasons. By a very small chance I can reabsorb these cells, and my immune system again will not recognize them as other, so I will effectively have cancer. And so this was the moment that I can decide, do I ask a scientist to do this for me and make my cells immortal? What is the meaning of bringing this scientist in to do this for me? And how does it inform the piece itself? And I have a scientist at home who works on immune cells. And why would I ever want to work on immortality or achieve any kind of immortality alone? So this was when the idea to invite my life partner to also be my immortal partner, in this sort of challenging of what does it mean to be immortal, and we could do each other's cells. So this is what we did for Immortality for Two. We took each other's cells from the immune system. These are lymphocytes from the blood, and vectored in genes, oncogenes, that make the cells immortal cell lines, and the funny thing is that while we're doing this together, because it's a relationship, because we do believe that we would share every moment of our lives, and whether it's a mortal life or an immortal life together, we would choose each other to do this because we love each other, because these are immune cells, they can never be in the same place together. So the price for immortality is still isolation in this piece, and it's sort of like ironic that this is the case. So just to finish off my talk, I will. So this is Immortality for Two. We were doing this piece in Luis's lab together. I was working with his cells, he was working with my cells. We show this piece in a very long table with cell flasks on each side of the table, so opposite sides of the table. Underneath the flasks of the living cells, you have microscopes, and the microscopes are filming the growth of the cells and projecting that growth onto the table. And so the only place where the two cell lines can actually coexist is on the digital overlap of the two projections. And so this is how we decided to show this piece and stress out some of the ironic parts of the piece, but also how working on immortality can be challenging, trying to reconcile these two. Sorry. I'm sorry, I forgot what I was going to show you last. Probably the video, yeah. So this is a 5-minute video. It talks about Immortality for Two, and it talks about Anti-Marta, which was the work that we did together afterwards. It's 5 minutes, so I think it's important that it's our work, joint work, so I never want to explain this work by myself. I always want Luis to join me in explaining this. My name is Marta de Menezes, and I'm an artist.
My name is Luis Graça. I teach medical students at University of Lisbon Medical School.
So just like an artist would choose to paint in oil or watercolors depending what they want to achieve with a piece, I choose living materials to achieve what I want.
I work in diseases where the immune system is the direct cause of the disease, such as autoimmune diseases.
Luis Graça is my husband. He's a professor of immunology at the University of Lisbon.
She's my favorite artist, and we have been married for about 20 years. Collaborating with Marta is very natural in the sense that as we are living together and as both of us like to discuss ideas, it is almost inevitable. The fact is that for many years, Marta worked with many different researchers, and we had never formally collaborated in a project until quite recently.
My new project, Marta, is actually in a way a follow-up of Immortality for Two, and it consists of inducing our bodies, Luis's body and my body, to produce antibodies against each other.
Marta starts with an idea that recapitulates very important experiments that were critical for the development of transplantation as a useful procedure. Van Root in the Netherlands discovered the rules of histocompatibility to get a donor and a recipient matched.
The surgeon is going to perform the surgery, and they're going to remove a little portion of skin from me and Luis, and they're going to exchange that, and the process of rejection will start then. Marta is, for me, a really interesting challenge. Very much in the same way that Immortality for Two, there's an impossible endeavor of being together in the same place as immortal. Marta has this impossibility as well of becoming one.
It is also a continuation of the exploitation of how two people that love each other can share a pact. In my relationship with Marta, and after 20 years of living together, sharing the same space, certainly there are things that we disagree with, and there are other things that we love. So I think there is a parallel in this project with also our personal life, that there is always a balance between disagreement and tolerance and love on the other hand.
The rejection process is a process of identifying and creating this metaphorical barrier of who we are and who the other person is. But I don't see it as a bad thing. I actually see it as a very positive thing, because when I'm in a relationship, I don't want to lose myself to the other person. So after the process of rejection, it's going to scab and it's going to scar because there was an intervention there. In a way, I think it's very fitting that something that symbolizes a relationship does leave a scar, it leaves a mark. It's something that will always remind me not only of the project, but in a way, some of the achievements of our relationship. We transform each other. A scar is not necessarily a bad thing, is just a visual memory or a physical memory of steps in our relationship. So the next project we're working together is tolerance. No, I just wanted to stress out that none of the projects that I ever done I did alone, and it's always an achievement for me and something I'm very proud of and very grateful for, of all the people that have worked with me, all the hosts of the labs, all of the PhD students, all of the heads of the lab and scientists who work directly with me, but other artists as well, because you work with scientists and artists if you're working in art and science. And I always want to have the acknowledgement that they were there and that they contributed to my work. So thank you.
So I know some of you have to run to class, and there's some of you are just didn't talk about them directly. But those who need to run to class, why don't you take a group picture, and then those who want to come out and chat, we're going to be longer. Why don't you put one of your slides in the back?
Thank you.